Yeah, baby.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Understanding CBD, a special Saturday edition here. We have an interesting conversation today. We have our CBD Recipe Guru, Stacy Rae, and the title of this talk is From Grandma's Garden, Talking Medicinal Plants. And we do have Stacy Rae here, and there's a few things that are really interesting about this interview. There's Susan Leopold has a PhD, and she did her PhD in a concept called dormant ethnobotany. And it's the idea that there's all this tribal knowledge and wisdom of how to work with nature, and it's wrapped up in a lot of these elders, and primarily the women's side of the cultures. And the younger generations a lot of times don't get the benefit of passing this down. And when I was younger, I cooked with my grandmother, and I'd always look over her shoulder, and she'd have me kneading dough, or I'd grind some meats up, and I'd ask her about the ingredients. And she said, the most important ingredient in my food is love.
Oh.
And that always stuck with me. So with no further ado, I'd like to bring in Stacy Rae, the CBD Recipe Guru.
Hey, Steve. How are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you? I love our conversations here, especially on
too.
Saturday, because it's almost like the pressure of all business and stuff is aside, and we can take some time and just talk about some fun stuff.
I know. And that's why I want to thank you so much for letting me talk about my grandma. I love her so much. And she made such an impression on me and my life and how I look at things and my mind being open to things. And of course, she was all about food and love. She told me that food can be a recipe for love. So I connect those two things together. But she also had all kinds of medicinal, really cool Indian folklore and medicinal things that she taught me. So that's why I'm kind of who I am.
That's beautiful. And it's important to be able to, you actually carry this knowledge, this tribal knowledge from where she got it from, which kind of ties us back through to history, which is hundreds of years old. The way that these stories were passed along and incorporated from different families. So I'd love to, the first time we met, you mentioned this influence from your grandmother. And I'm really looking to hear more about this wonderful, powerful woman. Where do you want to start? I mean, tell us about your grandmother. When do you know when she was born, and where in the world?
Yes. She was born in 1900, and she was born in Mexico City. That's where she was born.
Oh,
and
okay.
so, yeah. And so, it's crazy. I have to reach out to family members, but I don't have hardly any pictures of her. I remember when I was a teenager, and I just grew up with her, and she was like the only person who seemed to have time for me and wanted to mentor me. My folks were just too busy in their world, and they didn't have time for me, but my grandma did. But so I was really artistic and creative, and really like a sponge kid, and so I wanted to show you, I drew this picture of my grandmother when I was a teenager.
Let me get you on the full screen.
Okay, can you get that? I don't know if you can see that or not. Can you see that, Steve?
Yeah, we can see it. I don't know if you can hear me. I've removed myself from the screen so we can get a full screen of you here.
Yeah. Okay. So anyhow, you can see all those wrinkles and all the wrinkles in the face, and then her long, there's my signature on the bottom of her braids. But yeah, so I drew that with pencil. I just drew that with pencil. And so that was a combination of two things, that picture. To me, as a little kid, I always saw those wrinkles in her face. Those were her lines of life in her face, because she went through so much stuff. And then, of course, when she was older, she didn't have long hair, but I saw a picture of her when she was a young girl, and she would do like that, part it down the middle and have the braids. And so I remember when I was a kid, I've always had long hair. I used to do like grandma and part it in the middle and have the braids, and I remember like an uncle and my dad would go, "Oh my God, you look like mama," So because I had, I was young at the same age that she had this picture, So, but anyhow, I'll have to see if I can dig up some more pictures. But anyhow, that's a picture of Grandma Julia.
Yeah, well, that helps to get a
Oh,
vision of you know, what she looks like and have that picture in our mind to, you know, as you tell the story. So
right.
when was the first time that do you remember the first time, or at least in the beginning, when you noticed that your grandmother had a gift to work together with plants?
No, I just think it was ever since I could remember. I mean, she was always in the kitchen. She lived, I used to, fantasize and romanticize her life because as a kid, it's much bigger than it really is, but she lived in Escondido in Southern California. And I used to say she owned a whole mountaintop and she did, and she had lemon trees and lime trees and grapefruit trees and avocado trees and grew everything. And I mean, it was her whole, that was life to her, plants and things like that. She nurtured that. And she had the most interesting garden of weird stuff. I thought, ooh, what is all this stuff? So that was her medicinal.
Did she ever use her medicinal plants on you, or did you observe
Yeah.
her using it on someone else?
No, she used them on me. I used to, I mean, the first story that I'm glad you asked about that. Like I say in my book, at the very beginning of my book, I say, yeah, at the very beginning of my book, let's get the book out.
Got one there.
Yeah, at the very beginning, I go, my grandma Julia was of Mayan descent. She was half chef, half shaman, and very imposing woman for barely 5 feet tall. She was tough as taffy, but just as sweet. So that's how she was. Grandma Julia. And so as a child, I was very sensitive and emotional, and so I would internalize my emotions and pain or whatever in my stomach. So I would have, oh my God, the worst stomach pains and stomach aches. And, I just couldn't hardly, intestinal stuff, just, oh, my stomach. So she goes, come on, let's get you some estafiate. And I go, what? And, this was always what she gave me was estafiate. And so we would go out and there's this tall stuff growing kind of light colored, and she'd pick it and we have a basket of it. And then we go in the house and then she would boil water and put the estafiate in like a tea, and maybe a little honey because it didn't taste very good, and so and no sooner than I drank it, I felt better. My stomach went away, like my pain went away. It was just like magic. And I went, God, Grandma, that's so great. And she goes, yeah, you need a stafiate a lot, But it's so funny because she'd made other things like that. If I had a cold or I didn't feel good, she would make, go out to her garden and pick mint, and then make a hot boiling water mixture and put some mint in it, sliced lemons, fresh honey, maybe a cinnamon stick. And I think when I was really sick one time, she threw in cloves of garlic, which was really gross. So garlic tea. But
yeah, well, a lot of the healing herbs don't have, because we're so used to artificial sweeteners and flavors, and our palate is kind of off. So when you go back to a plant medicine, which I take shots of lemon juice and cayenne pepper in the morning.
Yeah.
You don't do it because it tastes good.
Right. I know, but Steve, come on. When you're a kid, you're like, "Ooh, gross."
Yeah, of course.
And they make you drink all
but you
this
trusted
stuff.
her. You trusted her enough to try it.
Well, yeah, and especially since I had nothing but stomach pains, and then as I grew up, I had, always female menstrual problems and horrible cramps and lots of pain. And so it's funny.
Well, I can't relate to you on there, but I hear about it.
Oh yeah, it's not fun. It's not, believe me. And it was something I inherited from my family. So we all had very bad female issues. So that estafiate helped with that, with the cramps in your stomach and just everything.
You know what it's estafiate. Do you know is there a translation? Is it a native plant to Mexico or Southern California, or is this
Well, I'll tell you what, I looked it up on the internet because, well, first of all, I grew up with my childhood, like living with estafiate, right? From only grandma. Like when I had 2 lives, one life was in the Southern California white bread world, and the other life was in the Mexico, San Diego-ish world, where all of grandma's friends lived with dirt floors that they had swept it with a little broom, and chickens and goats would live in there. And I go, ew, gross, but I would get in a lot of trouble if I would disrespect her friends because, she knew what it was like to live in poverty and struggle. And so you respect people. Like we would always buy their eggs and buy their cheeses and buy their, so I had this experience of these two worlds, so it was always kind of a dichotomy of a way to grow up, but it was good because then I saw how many different people can live, and so when I finally grew up and thought to myself, did I just dream the word estaffiate? Like, did I grow up going, what is, oh, grandma gives you estaffiate. What is that? So I went into this Mexican grocery store and I walked in and I thought, I'm just going to throw it out. And I don't know if I'm saying it right. I don't know, So I go, do you guys have something called estaffiate? And then the lady goes, oh, estaffiate. Oh, your tummy makes your tummy good. Oh, good for your tummy. You come here, And I go, oh my gosh, I didn't imagine this, like this is a real thing. I had all these good memories of a child, like detailed memories. So I trusted my memory and it was right on. And so, yeah. And I looked it up on the internet last night because I knew we were talking about this and I thought, there are so many weird things that she did and gave me, and I just don't know if there's any information on it, So I looked up estaffiate, and they said that it was called women's sage, SAGE, women's sage, and it was used to relieve menstrual pain, primarily, and stomach aches and common cold symptoms, nausea, diarrhea. So it was a thing, it was a real thing. Now,
so is it like a variety of sage? The plant sage that grows, or is
I
it?
don't know any more than that. I mean,
Yeah.
I just did a real basic,
yeah,
a basic thing. So women's sage. So I don't know, but if you look up estaffiate, I don't know if it's just native to, well, no, it's not native to Mexico because I had it in California. So, but I mean, it's, I don't know where it originated from, but we had it in Southern California. So yeah, so that was like super cool that was my, oh my God, I have all these aha moments. And that was one of them, yeah, it's a real thing.
Did you ever, when you had stomach problems, were you always, as you were young, using plant medicine, or did you also have traditional medicine? Like, did someone ever give you Pepto-Bismol or, something else to settle your stomach?
Yeah, they did. And it never really worked that good. Or then I would take certain women's, pills for cramps. And I always had side effects because I was really sensitive, or I got, whatever, like a little like tired, or, there's always side effects to me because I was really sensitive. And to me, the very best thing was always estaffiate for my stomach.
Oh, that's good. Well, I wanted to just let you know this. We have a listener on LinkedIn. He just says, "Wonderful content. Thank you, Steve and Stacy." So I thought you'd appreciate that. So people do listen when we talk about.
Oh, that's so cool.
And the message that you're bringing of listening to your grandmother and plant medicine is awesome. So estaffiate, that was in an early age that kind of opened your minds up to plants.
Yes.
How did that carry through? And were there any other ways that you've seen her use her magic in the kitchen to heal other ailments of you or other people?
Yeah, I mean, well, if we were really sick, of course, I mean, I think a lot of people probably hear this from their family, but if you have a really bad head cold and, she would say, okay, come on, she put me on this little box or put me on a box on a chair, I mean, ever since I could remember, I'm standing up there watching her, because I'm this little shrimpy kid, and she would boil water and then put in various things in the water, like herbs and the garlic and lemon and so then she would, if I couldn't breathe, I had a hard time breathing, she would put a towel over my head, and I'd put my head, over the stuff so I could breathe in all that. So it opened up my sinuses, and it did, I mean, there were little simple things like that. So we did stuff like that. And she claimed too that when you did the cinnamon, the honey, the lemon, the garlic, that it cleaned your body, like it was cleansing, So like if you were sick, you weren't clean. Like there's stuff that's going on in your body, you're not clean. So you got to clean yourself out. So, she would make, of course, peppers. I mean, my gosh, I mean, if I didn't eat every bit of her hot food, then, I was in trouble. 'Cause, but the peppers were healing, capsaicin in the peppers. At one point when I had my Mexican food line, Cactus Kid, like I was the pepper lady. So I learned all the stuff about the capsaicin and all the stuff about peppers. So like, I'm so into peppers and the nutritional elements of it and the medicinal elements of it. So it's a really good medicine, if you will, plant medicine. So yeah, she taught me that stuff too.
Did she let you watch her make a lot of these recipes? And
Oh, yeah.
was she pretty open at sharing the recipes with you?
Oh yeah, she definitely did. Oh yeah, that was part of the deal. Is like I wanted to learn. I was so curious. I could never, shut up. But grandma, but grandma, what about this? And she, she always had an answer for me. She wanted to teach me everything. I'll never forget the time when I may have told you this, Steve. My parents are always they didn't have time for me. And so my grandma always did, and she was with us a lot, or I stayed with her. So one time I said to my dad, I go, Dad, how come the sky is blue and the sun is yellow? And he goes, oh, brother, I'm too busy. Leave me alone. Go talk to your mother. So then I go to my mother and she's in the kitchen. And so I said, Mom, why is the sky blue and the sun yellow? And she goes, are you kidding me? She goes, I got more important things to do. Go bother your grandmother. So I go to Grandma Julia and I said, Grandma Julia, why is the sky blue and the sun yellow? And she just said, I don't know. And she says, that's a good question. And then she would say, I know. I kind of feel like I'm going to cry just when I say this. She says, maybe it's because God wanted us to have something beautiful to look at. And I go, oh, Grandma.
What a fantastic soul.
I mean, I'm tearing up just even saying that, but that stuck with me my whole life, Steve.
Well, it seems like she really was just really passionate and cared for other people and had a lot of empathy and a need to connect and saw the value in relationship, and didn't push aside. And I can see that how the impact that made on you. Not to be dorky, but Andrew Huberman is a scientist. I think he's at Stanford University. He's an ophthalmologist, and you just back to your question about why is the sky blue and orange and yellow, and actually there are receptors in your eyes that when you wake up, the blue and orange color register on the bottom of your retina and stimulates chemicals in your body that help you recognize that it's now time to wake up, and also triggers at the end of the day, the sunset. Similarly triggers the same receptors in your eyeball to trigger the chemical reaction in your body to start settling down.
Wow.
So that's and I know this because one of the big things that people come to me for is sleep problems.
Oh,
and doing a lot of research about sleep and how you can get good sleep, the circadian rhythm of when you wake and sleep cycles following the sun is important. So what he suggests is within the first 15 minutes of sunrise is to go outside and just look at the sky, and the blue and orange colors actually have this reaction in your body. And the same at the end of the day, if you can get outside just as the sun is setting without sunglasses on, don't stare bright at the sun, but it's almost right at sunrise. You can just look at the sky, get that stimulus, and your body naturally is going to be in tune to get a better night's sleep and to be more in tune with your circadian rhythm. The other thing that taught me was in your sleeping conditions, if you have to get up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom, it's better to have floor lighting than to have lighting on the ceiling. So if you can have lights that either shine on the ground, it doesn't wake your body up as much as if you have lights coming from above. There's some information that I happen to pick up along the way.
I think there's so much value and legitimacy to our elders and this historic education on medicinal things and just nature in general. Because when you described about going outside in the morning and then in the evening, my grandma used to do that. She would get up first And every time when I wake up early, she was already outside with her cup of coffee in the morning when the sun was coming up. And the same thing at night, Steve. She was there as the sun was going down. So she did that. That's what she did.
I'm not surprised because she's a wise woman, and the wisdom comes like the wisdom marks in her face. The
Yes.
wrinkles.
Yes.
Being in tune with nature is. I think it's where we've gotten really far from. That's why I love the story and the influence that it's taken on your life, because you then grew up using recipes, and
Yes.
food became something that you not only healed yourself, but you also
Yeah.
share recipes.
Oh, I love doing that. And I mean, I I loved all the different foods that I learned, from her and the recipes, and probably too much. Okay. I gained a lot of weight. I mean, it was also like if you didn't eat everything grandma gave you, she goes, "What's wrong? My food's not good enough for you." Oh no, I love it. I love it. So there was that. But no, I wasn't as active as I could have been, but I just loved creating things, and grandma used to make things beautiful too and teach me. I saw the beauty in the nature in nature, and how she made things beautiful and used the real parts of the food. And so I really got into the food thing and making things beautiful, and edible and delicious. And then, of course, like I said, I didn't really take good care of myself and gained weight. So I realized that all things in moderation. So I scaled back on a lot of things, and then I changed a lot of things, and then I exercised a lot more, and I became more active, and then I ate. I had dietitians in modern medicine, so I lost over 100 pounds. So I worked really hard to like turn my life around, and I knew that food was, I mean, food is like a medicine. If you can eat bad food and it makes you sick, you can eat good food and it can make you well. And so I changed it around and ate more good, whole, natural foods, simple foods, but I made them good and tasty, and pretty and beautiful and appetizing. So I really got into that. And then, of course, I learned too that CBD was a plant. CBD came from a plant, and how it had medicinal properties. And so my mind was open to that. And, Grandma Julia really planted those seeds in me. And I have another cousin who is a doctor, and she was inspired. She told me, we've had these talks. She was also inspired by Grandma Julia to be a doctor, because Grandma Julia was like half chef, half shaman. So she inspired that. So she inspired me to be half chef, half shaman, and she inspired my cousin to be doctor. So she was really much more inspirational than she realized, and she also taught us other things that aren't even related to the foods. And I was going to tell you a few other stories that are really interesting, but she just taught me that you have to help people who are less fortunate than you. That there's a lot of poor people. They struggle, they barely can survive for one reason or another, and it's your duty as a human being to be kind and help other people. And because one day you might need kindness and help. And so I guess if you want to look at it as karma, you can look at it any way you want, but I was taught to do that. And so I spent a good part of my life doing that and being of service to other people. And even today I'm a paralegal, and I help poor people who can't afford legal expenses for their defense. And I do a lot of stuff for no charge and go visit people in prison. And so I donate a lot of my life to helping other people in any way I can. And then at the end of the day, I did it because I was taught to do it. But then I realized, wow, it feels really good helping people. And so it's almost like, even though their lives change, I let them know I care, that there's love, and they just change. People need that. And so it makes me feel good. So at the end of the day, I'm just being honest. It's sort of a selfish thing because it makes me feel good too. Like there's a gratification that I've never had by helping other people.
Well, of course, and you're keeping your grandmother's spirit alive through you.
Oh,
And this is how we talk about, this infinite life energy, and it continues, and, it can't be destroyed. And, that's the beauty of living, is paying it forward, passing it forward.
oh yeah.
Did you have any favorite recipes from Grandma Julia that you remember?
Yeah, I think my favorite recipe is hot pork ribs with green chili verde and homemade bean soup with bacon and homemade flour tortillas.
Wow. That
That
sounds like
was
a
like,
nice meal.
oh my God, that was, if she made me that, she wouldn't come right out and say, oh, honey, come here, I love you. No, no. No, but by her giving me this energy and the love and the time, and if she made me that dish, I knew she loved me so much, because that was my favorite dish. So that's how I say food can be a recipe for love. She taught me that. She taught me that food can be a recipe for love. So, but that's one of my favorite, well, several of my favorite recipes,
Yeah,
but
and if you guys haven't gotten this book yet, the
oh,
CBD Recipe Guru, you should check it out on Amazon. What's your you can also get it from your website or access it through your website.
you can, but the website will just take you a link to Amazon.
It'll
So
take you to Amazon.
yeah,
Okay,
that's the
gotcha. So
easiest.
if you do in the kitchen, if you go to Amazon in the kitchen with the CBD Recipe Guru, that'll pull this up, and you can order a copy. It's a really good book because it not only gives you recipes that you can incorporate CBD in, and they're delicious recipes as they are. It does teach you how to get CBD into it, but it also has educational information and knowledge backed by doctors that you've worked with. Because one of the cool things about you is not only did you have this plant medicine background, but you also looked at the science and wanted to make sure that it was valid, and you had some evidence and it was okay with modern medicine to mix it in.
Absolutely. I have the endorsement and the support of 2 doctors in my book, along with QR codes that you can scan your phone over. And then the doctors are sitting there like at your kitchen table talking to you about this and that and the endocannabinoid and dosing and mindful breathing and stress and anxiety. So you're going, wow, I'm here with all these cool doctors, so it's really a different interactive kind of book. And, Steve, I meant to ask you, is it okay if I tell you about that story about my grandfather and how he,
Absolutely. I was just going to ask you before we cut this off, and
yeah.
we check out for the day, if there's any other stories that you wanted to share before we go. So yeah, perfect
Oh,
timing.
cool. This was the one that is the coolest, because I did a little research last night, and Steve, it will blow your mind when you hear what I found out. Okay. So my grandmother had 5 kids during the Depression, and it was really hard to, keep everybody fed and whatnot, so my grandfather did work hard, but a lot of times he would go gamble and lose the money and get into fights and all these other things. So one day he came home, didn't have his money, and got into a fight, and somebody, she said, like slit all around his whole wrist, just slit it with a knife, and he was bleeding and he was hanging. She says was just hanging there by a thread. And so I said, oh my God, Grandma Julia, what happened? Did you go to the doctors? Did they stitch him up? She goes, oh, we didn't do that. We don't go to the doctors. They didn't have the money. So she did all these ancient things to keep his wrist from falling off. Okay. So the first thing she said she did is she got a broom and put a clean towel on it. And she went in the corners of the room and got all the cobwebs out of the corners of the room. Okay. And then she got the cobwebs and she packed them all around his wrist, just packed them on really tight. And then she had some white linens and burned them. And then when the ashes were cool, she packed the ashes of the white linen all on top of the cobwebs. And then it was all packed in really tight. And then she got a needle and thread and, of course, sewed him up like she's hemming, a skirt. And then she wrapped it in really tight rags. So that I said, oh my gosh, did he get an infection? I can't believe that worked. She goes, Stacy, after it healed, we took everything off and you could hardly tell, and he never got an infection. It was great, and everything was great. So I went, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. So it was just weird to hear all of these things. So I looked up last night on the internet about spiders' webs and if there's any kind of medicinal connection for that. And I found out that it was some traditional remedy to stop bleeding. So there was something in there that stopped bleeding. And it had a natural antiseptic and antifungal property, and it prevented infections. and the cobwebs were laced with penicillin fungi, and it was discovered by Alexander Fleming, and he discovered penicillin and found him in cobwebs. So it was just amazing that there was such medical background to, now this isn't a plant, but it's still like, a different kind of way of healing. So isn't that wild?
That's amazing. I mean, that's really cool. And, I believe this, it's only been modern science, right? What has it been within the past 100 years or so?
Yeah.
Um, Humans have existed for much, much longer than that.
Yeah.
And, the modern medicine has helped, our civilization live longer, but things like plumbing and clean drinking water have done much larger impact on it and on the life of people. So the remedies and the things that we used to do to survive that were passed down from generation to generation really make a difference.
Oh, really? It
You know?
did. I mean, other little tiny things like you get a burn, she would go out and get cactus. And I mean, we talk about aloe vera, but she would use any cactus. She had cactuses growing and she'd get the juice and pack it on there. Or she would use cold butter, which I don't think that's really good. But since it was cold, it felt good, but it was always like, okay, cold butter, but she would put that on, so for burns like that. But she also told me that when her children were young and they had a cold, this sounds so weird, Steve, she would get fresh tomatoes and smash them all on their feet, smash fresh tomatoes, and then put socks on. And they'd have to lay there, and something about the acid from the tomato would go in through their body, through their feet, and then their cold would be better. So,
Well, no, I mean, I think the skin on the feet is the thinnest layer of skin in your body. So if you use any type of, if you want anything to absorb into the bloodstream, like if you're using any sort of patch or transdermal,
yeah,
the feet are a conduit to the body. So you can actually
cool.
put a patch of anything on the foot, and it's proven. Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, and I don't know anything about the tomatoes, but I'd imagine that she knew something in the compounds that are in the tomatoes that that matter.
I know. And sometimes she said she would even cut potatoes, just raw potatoes, and put those inside the bottom of the socks, and then put their, I know, it's just weird stuff.
I've heard about onions on your feet.
I don't know about that, but
Yeah,
maybe.
I think it was like meant to like pull toxins out or something. But I just the smell of it. Linda would never let me get into bed with something like that.
Yeah, I don't blame
With
her.
onions in my socks. But I make I had inflammation in joints, so I make these poultices of ginger.
Oh, wow.
And I hear ginger helps pull out things. I'm willing to try anything as long as it's a clean, natural product. I'm willing to give it a shot.
Sure. Yeah. But anyhow, but thank you. Those were the things that I wanted to tell you about.
Awesome. That's great, Stacy. Grandma Julie, actually, she had a name for you also. She called you what did she call you? Anastasia, was it?
Anastasia.
Anastasia.
See, yeah, because Stacy is more American, and my mom was, more, she wasn't Hispanic. She was blonde hair, green eyes, and okay, you're going to be Stacy. And so my grandma goes, Stacy, what kind of name is Stacy? So she called Anastasia. So that was my Hispanic name.
Yeah, it's definitely a more authentic or traditional name in her vernacular. Well, that's great, Stacy.
Well, thank you,
Anastasia. Well, thanks for sharing your story with us.
I'm
glad we got a chance to kind of learn a little bit of the background to the CBD Recipe Guru and where your inspiration came from.
Yes.
And we have a talk coming up next week. When you mentioned your grandmother out sipping coffee, you're going to show us and teach us some of your special secret recipes on how to incorporate CBD into your coffee. Is that right?
Yes, and that's very important because a lot of people don't know the proper way to use different types of CBD with different types of food. And so we're going to have a CBD coffee talk, next Friday, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, you're hilarious. So yeah, if you're listening to this, you can see the events either on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. We have the event set up for next Friday. Please give it a like and sign up so you'll be attending. And the idea behind this and really behind Stacy's book is many patients aren't compliant with the doctor recommendations, and most people, if you drink coffee, you don't forget to drink your coffee in the morning. So here's a cool way to incorporate your plant medicine in with your coffee, so you don't forget to use it in the morning. And
That's what I
join us
do.
next Friday, almost a week from now. So it'll be here
Okay,
before
cool.
you know it. And everyone, thanks for listening. And
Thank
Stacy,
you.
thanks so much for sharing your story and giving us your beautiful smile on a
Aw,
Saturday.
thank
And
you.
we will talk to everybody soon.
Sounds good.